I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
So welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 49th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast.
We're doing something different today.
Yeah, we're talking about a Star Trek Discovery comic, and we haven't delved into the Discovery comics before.
Have we not at all?
No.
Okay, but we're gonna over the course of a few podcasts, cover them all.
Yeah, they're all the ones that are currently released. These are all of the Star Trek Discovery comics that are out that you need to be caught up on before you get into Season 2.
So I have not been keeping up closely on these. You have, and so I will be the sounding board guy on this one.
Yeah, so
I will interrogate you, and I will make you talk and tell me the secrets of T'Kuvma and various others.
Yeah, the one we're talking about today is Star Trek Discovery, The Light of KAHLESS. It was originally a 4-issue miniseries. And I'm just going to guide all of y'all on a journey through T'Kuvma's backstory, and we'll see his secret origin. As they like to say in the
comic
funny
vernacular.
book world.
You know, before we get to that, I want to quick backtrack to the basic Trek comic relationship, specifically with Discovery, because we talked about this early on, that there was kind of something that sounded a little bit unique with Discovery, is that right from the ground, from the get-go, they would have canonical tie-ins with comics and novels. Did you feel that they have stayed
Well, they're not
true to
canonical.
that?
They're not canonical.
Are they not?
But
they have input, though, from official show people.
because they have one of the staff writers, Kirsten Beyer,
Mm-hmm.
who is also the writer who came up with the idea for the Picard show that's currently being developed.
Right.
And she's written a number of Star Trek novels. But yeah, she is in charge of all the tie-in material as far as comics or novels go.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's actually credited as the co-writer on this comic we're talking about. It's written by her and Mike Johnson, who you might know from some of the Kelvin Star Trek comics.
So Mike Johnson wrote some of the Kelvin stuff, and
He actually wrote all of it.
Oh, okay.
Now that I think about it.
And the artist Tony Shasteen.
Yes.
Is that what we're going with? I'm assuming he also worked on some of the Kelvin stuff.
I believe so.
Because I was flipping through it, and the art seemed very, very familiar. It reminded me of the artist who I'd seen on some of the Kelvin material that was actually particularly good, I thought, with the capturing likenesses of characters, which, generally speaking, people looking at buying licensed property stuff the readership tends to want that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
You want to get a feel of the characters you know and love.
Yeah, so basically this is just the story of T'Kuvma before the events of Star Trek Discovery, going from his childhood to moments before the first episode.
How many episodes did T'Kuvma last before he was offed?
2.
2. So that's interesting. The first Discovery comic was a prequel story to a character who lasted 2 episodes.
Yes.
But he did set in motion all of the events that would come to follow. And interesting, I'm looking at the first page, and it has this image of a shattered Klingon. Is it what they call the D7?
No, this is the sarcophagus ship.
Oh, right.
So we actually open after the Battle of the Binary Stars.
Yep.
After T'Kuvma is dead, and his flagship is crippled. If you remember on the show, L'Rell and Voq were on board the sarcophagus ship for a little over 6 months.
Right.
So this is the.
Was that when like supplies were dwindling and all that stuff?
So that's the framing device that they use here, is that it opens with this, and it's basically L'Rell telling Voke the story of T'Kuvma.
Okay. Sort of a, you need to know about the guy who basically made you the person you are now, or who
right.
you should aspire to.
Because in case you don't remember from the episode,
recap is good.
The Battle of the Binary Stars, second episode of Star Trek Discovery. T'Kuvma is dead, and he places Voke.
T'Kuvma, who had united the clans of the
and kicked off the war with the Federation.
Mm-hmm.
He's dead, and he leaves Voke in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Voke being the torchbearer is what they were calling him.
Right, and he was an albino Klingon.
Yeah, and they actually bring up his albinoism in this story. But we'll just go straight into the story.
Yep.
Is that it opens on this ship, and you see the Klingons feasting on the corpse of a Starfleet officer, which is most likely Captain Giorgio.
Oh, that's messed up.
And as they're feasting on her, they're
well, didn't they taunt Burnham with that? When.
Well, that's later.
Later episode.
We know that she got ate, and they're eating someone here, and she's the only person we know of that was on that ship. So
I suppose it was classy of them to not draw a little Michelle Yeoh face on the body. But yes, okay.
Well, yeah, they're making fun of her uniform. They're saying that the humans call this armor. I will wipe my ass with this armor. So obviously, very disrespectful of their enemy here that they're feasting on. But Voke isn't having it. He's telling them, they need to get back to work repairing the ship. We're running low on supplies, and he's kind of feeling the pressures of leadership and, kind of doubting himself if he's going to be able to get them out of the situation. And this is when L'Rell approaches them to start talking about just the story of T'Kuvma and how T'Kuvma came to command this Klingon ship of the dead.
I see that specifically Voke is worried about being able to win over the loyalty of the crew, and he's like, I'm just a simple Klingon. T'Kuvma was a legend, and L'Rell says, and yet the legend, T'Kuvma, chose the simple Klingon to lead his people now. So she's like, you're the chosen one, but and she's like, if you knew him the way I did, you'd understand why he chose you. So she's kind of doing this to pump him up and get him to understand his role.
And we know eventually, she gets the hots for Voke, so that might be already happening in the.
There's nothing
that might be part of her motivation.
There is no sexier first date than hearing this story of the dead Klingon warlord who passed on the rulership to you. From a sexy Klingon lady.
Well, I don't know if I'd say she's sexy. Maybe Mary Chieffo outside of the Klingon makeup.
She may be unconventionally attractive to your racist eyes, but
my speciesist eyes.
Yes. I'm lensing it through Voke's eyes.
Okay.
But okay, so we flash back
to little kid T'Kuvma running through the fields.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not having a good time because he's actually being chased by his brothers, and he's picked on and bullied by his older brothers.
Yep.
His only escape is to go into the forest, but they don't follow him. And this is where he discovers his father's sarcophagus ship that's kind of just crashed and laying in this field next to their estate. And so we learn a little bit more about the sarcophagus ship. We knew from the show that he got it from his father.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the setting here is that his father is already dead. His uncle is in charge of their house.
Mm-hmm.
And his brothers are assholes to him. And he finds the ship that they have, and his sister, Ja'ula, is hanging out on here. And there's a whole bunch of peasant Klingons. And this is where they go in a really weird direction with the Klingon aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Because they doesn't really look like any Klingon stuff we've ever seen before. And so if you hate the Discovery Klingons in Season 1, this is kind of a really awkward read. And it's something that I kind of struggled with because the Klingons don't feel that Klingon.
Hmm.
But the world building here is kind of interesting if you want to be generous with it. Is that like basically the situation here is that their house used to be a lot more prestigious, but it's fallen on harder times. Their dad is dead. They used to have a bunch of servants that the house would provide for when they were a wealthier family, better off. And now like the descendants of all those servants don't really have anywhere to go, and they're kind of like living in this ship. And Takuvma's sister Jaula is a part of this fanatic sect of the Klingon religion, and so she kind of feels like this is a sacred ship, and she places on little kid Takuvma. She puts on like the navigator helmet that we actually see Klingons using in the show on this ship.
Yeah.
But she places it on his head so he can like see through the ship's scanners and see like the decay of their house, because she tells him to look at where the wall is that goes around their property and how small it is compared to where it used to be before they had to sell a bunch of their land to like get out of debt and stuff. And
it's kind of a cool idea of like revisiting, looking through the ship's eyes.
Yeah, and then she tells him to look up at the stars, and the brightest star that you can see from Kronos is Boreth. And as we know from Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Rightful Heir, that part of the myth of KAHLESS, the unforgettable, was that when he left Kronos, he said that he would return. And it's kind of like the, what you see with a lot of Messiah type stuff. Like
or King Arthur.
King Arthur or Christ, or I guess even Dune Paul kind of had that going on.
And let's not forget Phoenix from the X-Men.
Oh yes, because we have to have an X-Men reference. But
check.
He pointed. KAHLESS pointed to the sky before he left, and pointed to the star Boreth, and said, "When he returns, that's where he'll be." So many centuries later, when Klingons went into space, they built a monastery there that we actually see Worf visit in Next Generation. But the plan for Jaula is she wants to leave their place on Kronos. Because her brothers are assholes, except for like little kid Takuvma. They're like the only two nice ones that get along. The only thing in her future there is that she'll get married off to some other house, and she would rather go to Boreth and wait for KAHLESS. And so she tells Takuvma that the two of them, they can.
Is that in Klingon context? Does that make her like a religious fanatic, or is this pretty just standard operating procedure? Would you say for a devoted Klingon?
I think the way that they're trying to depict it here is that she is more fanatical than the typical Klingon.
Okay.
But I think that's like part of their societies. You have people who like do go and like join the religious sects. Like you have on Earth where you have if someone's going to go like be a monk in a Buddhist temple, that's a lot different from just casually dabbling with Buddhism.
Right.
So yeah, she is like one of the more devoted, we'll say. So her plan is for them to repair the ship, and they can take all of the poor Klingon peasants and go to Boreth, and it kind of gives her and Takuvma both a way off the planet. But they don't want to tell the rest of their family about that. And
do they think their family would stop them?
Yeah, they don't want them to learn that that ship has any value,
right?
Because then they'll want to use it for basically like the rest of his family. They're kind of almost more like Ferengi than Klingons, because like they're very concerned about like their acquisitions and like having like their family be in a prestigious state.
Well, two things. I guess first of all, it does seem a little weird to me that there was a ship, even within a few miles of like where they live, that's as big as that we know that ship was, that had not been like picked apart for whatever value it might have.
Well, you have to run through like that thorny forest that like his brothers wouldn't chase him through. So
no way to get through a thorny forest.
Not even with all the technology that Klingons have. Yeah. Well, we see them at like a family dining room, and we see Takuvma's uncle, and he's got like this really weird like catfish whisker mustache that I kind of hate.
Yeah, I'm not loving the look on him.
They do keep the ship secret, and Takuvma ends up going back there a lot, and he's actually like learning how to fight from a friend that he makes, one of the peasants, who's also an albino like Voke, named Kel. And they're basically teaching Takuvma to basic combat skills. So they're like, oh yeah, your brothers are assholes. You haven't learned anything from them, so we'll teach you how to fight. That's what all little Klingon boys need to learn. And he's definitely a lot more close to these people than with his biological family, with the exception of his sister.
Do you think at that age he's depicted that Alexander could take him? When
no.
he was a little kid.
No, because like Takuvma actually seems to like learn pretty quickly.
Okay, just checking.
And they actually comment. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're picking up the duck tog skills, the knife that originally showed up in Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock."
Oh, nice.
The small little handheld knife.
Yeah, that was a cool looking thing.
And then we also see that Takuvma and Ja'ula's uncle is down in the catacombs of their house. Their house is called House Gearjaw, by the way, which. A lot of these Klingon names I don't think sound that Klingon.
Right.
So there's a few things in this comic that kind of bug me, but we see that they have their catacombs, or they have all of their family members in sarcophagi. And the sarcophagus ship, we know in the show, eventually, it's covered in these sarcophagi.
Right.
And I know that was like kind of a weird point of contention with some fans, because on Next Generation, Klingons claim that they just discard the dead. After the spirit leaves the body, it's just an empty shell.
Right. They don't venerate, and they don't have coffins and funerals and stuff.
But then they contradict that on Deep Space Nine when Worf says, yeah, after a warrior dies, his comrades can hang out by his body and keep the predators at bay until his spirit makes the journey to Stovokor.
That's pretty cool.
But then in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, when Spock is giving himself the trivia test at the opening of the movie, he has to identify a Klingon mummification glyph.
So Discovery might inadvertently be helping out Trek lore a lot by revealing these houses and these subcultures, because those could all be true. And Worf is just talking about, he's like, well, that's the dominant tradition, but he's not going to qualify that every time he says that and say, there are some other ones, but this is the primary one. He's just going to say whatever the dominant tradition is that he knows of. So it could be that, yes, there's some guys did mummification, but it's unusual. Some people did this. But
that's what Takuvma's family is doing, is the mummification.
Yeah.
So, basically what the point I was trying to make is that canonically, there are multiple Klingon death rituals.
Yeah.
So it's okay. This fits. But we see like Takuvma goes into the catacombs, and Takuvma's uncle is freaking out about the sarcophagus that was made for his brother. He says that it doesn't look anything like him, and you did such a terrible job.
Like the likeness that's carved into the coffin.
And he's yelling at another albino Klingon who's Kel's father. So it's Takuvma's little albino friend's dad, who's also albino. I thought this was just so weird. There's so many like albino Klingons, because like Voke is not that unique now.
Right, it's a little bit of an odd call.
And so I'm wondering if like early on, if that was going to be like, oh yeah, there's kind of like this race of albino outcasts on Kronos.
Right.
Because they were actually going to bring this up more in the story. But the uncle is basically saying like, oh, like I need a real like spiritual master who can make me some proper looking sarcophagus. And he says to Takuvma, like, what about you? Like, we can train you for that. And then Takuvma's like, oh no, what about Borath? Mm-hmm. And so he's like letting it slip, his secret fantasy plan of how to escape with his sister. But his uncle's just like, oh yeah, Borath, I can send you to learn with the monks there. What a good idea.
Yeah.
And so he's basically going to send Takuvma away, and he's going to have to leave his sister. And so he goes to basically say farewell to her. She's still hanging out on the sarcophagus ship. And basically the plan they come up with is that yeah, like, you just go ahead and go, and, I'll get there if I can. But, your first duty is going to be to KAHLESS. And, it sucks that we can't fly there together. And he's also leaving behind his albino friend, Kel, who has some attraction to Takuvma's sister, which is going to be a problem because Takuvma's family is going to want to marry Jaula off to another noble house. So that's going to be kind of a dead end, you would think. But we'll see more of that in a second. But Takuvma does go to Borath, and we see him in he's basically like a little Klingon, Little Red Riding Hood, like in the rain.
Well,
like approaching this big temple.
All right, you made it sound very uncool, but he's like, he has that monastic, hooded, cloaked figure look, or whatever. It happens to be red, but I don't know that makes him Red Riding Hood. Don't hate.
But yeah, that's how the first issue, or the first chapter, concludes.
So it's interesting. Having not read this, I can see that it doesn't scratch the itch of most Klingon stories that I've read, but it is interesting. Tell me more. Where do they go from here?
Well, it then cuts to a few years further in the future, where Takuvma is actually training in the monastery, and we see him in these fire caves that just have like these big lava pits and flames. And there's all these Klingon students meditating naked on these rocks, and they're...
And there's like this massive like cavern whose like entire floor is covered in lava, and they're like on these like these columns of rock that they just go and chill on.
Yeah, and they're basically like...
That's pretty Klingon.
They're basically... I kind of like the visuals here. But we're going to see a bunch of naked Discovery Klingons in this issue. But basically, they're forcing all the students to remain in meditation in the heat next to the lava, and then one by one they give in, and they retreat away from the heat, and the last one remaining is Takuvma. And so we start to see here how much conviction he has, and that's kind of the impression you got from the shows, like, oh yeah, this guy is part of what makes him so deadly is that he is he's a true believer,
right?
And I guess that actually kind of ties into in the show when Voke is able to like put his hand over the flame in the first episode to like impress Takuvma.
Yeah, that kind of dedication would be the kind of thing he's interested in, especially heat dedication.
Yeah, he probably like sees some of himself in that.
Out of curiosity, when you're reading this, did you get is there any authorial voice or anything suggesting? Is this made out to be sad that he's falling into kind of this thing, or is it like the rise of a conqueror?
Yeah, it's definitely like the rise of a conqueror, because in this moment, this is when he gets like his first vision of he doesn't see KAHLESS himself, but he does see a light that he feels would like guide him to KAHLESS, and so his instructors are kind of impressed by him. And then they're doing another similar trial where it's kind of the same thing, but it's with cold. Where basically they're making like all these Klingon kids like run around in the snow in this blizzard.
Yep, naked.
And totally nude. And they don't expect all of them to return alive.
By the way, this is where I feel like Klingons with hair would be a much better visual, because they'd be in that blizzard with their manes blowing in it, and they just look so cool. And instead, it's like it looks like a bunch of Charles Xaviers running around.
And it's not mentioned very often, but like Klingons are actually like weaker in the cold.
Oh yeah.
They rarely mention that in the shows, and I kind of like that they rarely mention that because Klingons would not want that to be well known.
Right.
But we actually see like one Klingon boy like fall behind some of the other ones. They're trying to like run for shelter, and they're leaving him behind, and these two kids are about to freeze to death. But then Takuvma like shows up, and he carries them. I guess like part of the trial was they had to find their way back to the shelter through the blizzard. It's kind of ambiguous what exactly is going on, but Takuvma makes it back with them.
You ever seen Lawrence of Arabia?
Yeah.
All right, then you know the scene I'm thinking of. That this is like what he does in the desert. This is a little bit of a Blizzard variant of that.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
And so here we kind of get a sense of Takuvma. Not only like does he have like the conviction and he's driven, but he also like he loves his fellow people. And that's kind of like, I mean, because what we know from Discovery, he's totally a complete racist, genocidal racist.
Right.
But that's what a lot of times those people kind of have that hatred. It kind of has some like twisted root in like the love of their kinship.
Right. Right. You would otherwise think if you could somehow excise that from them, that their love for their brother or whatever is an admirable quality. But yeah, that seems like an accurate depiction of how crazy xenophobes might be devoted to their own.
And the monks continue to be more impressed with Takuvma to the point where one speculates that he might even be KAHLESS reincarnated, which is kind of how Takuvma was presented on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Takuvma receives a letter from Kronos, and it turns out his sister Jaula is getting married into House Mokai.
It's very Game of Thronesy.
Yeah,
I mean, the Klingon
totally
stuff always has been, to be honest.
Yeah, more so here. They dialed that element of it up.
Yep.
So now, and he's kind of sad because he knew his sister never really wanted to get married. Her plan was to come join him here on Borath.
Mm-hmm. I wish these Klingon monks weren't all wearing kind of like robes with sashes and things like that. I need that spiky armor, hardcore look.
Yeah, or even like some of the robes that like we'd see Klingon monks in like the Next Generation when they came here to Borath, and they looked a lot cooler.
I can't picture it in my head, but I believe you.
Well, we'll have like an image of that.
Oh, awesome!
On the screen if you're watching this on
so
YouTube.
Nice.
But yeah, a lot of the designs are kind of dull here, but I think that might have just been like the limitation of like doing tie-in material. You can't do anything too crazy. It all has to match.
And for all I know, that was even like based on some like costume designs that they had that were just like off. Didn't get heavy use on the show. So for all I know, that was kind of part of their new look for the Klingons.
But now that Takuvma has the letter from home saying that his sister is getting married, he's told that. Yeah, you have to, fly home for the wedding, and you leave in the morning. And so he makes his return trip to Kronos, but he's kind of a changed man at this point. He's wearing one of those boring robes that we're talking about, like the monks wear, and he has like a lot more confidence though. And his brothers are actually arguing. One of them is saying, "Oh, I can't believe you're my blood. I should sell you all to House Mokai." And
that's one brother to another one.
Yeah, and as like they're having this argument, they notice Takuvma approaches them, and they're kind of taken back a little bit, and they're like, "Oh, Takuvma, you seem a little different now, and you're not the scrawny little kid you used to be before you left."
But he doesn't drop a beat down on him.
I mean, he doesn't seem happy, but like the panel where he kind of like embraces his brother. He's kind of like grabbing both of his arms. And
yeah, he's kind of like holding him like his...
Kind of like to show him how... Like, this is how strong I've become while I was gone. But then he does see his sister, Jaula, and she looks a lot different. And they kind of draw her to look a little bit like older, more mature here.
I noticed she says to one of the brothers, she's like, "Is there a little fear in your voice?" After Takuvma's embraced one of them. So she picked up on the fact that they're a little bit cowed by him. So they reunite.
And they return to the ship, but she says, unfortunately I'm not part of this dream that we had anymore. I'm not going to go to Borath, and we're not going to be like these devout little Klingons on our quest for KAHLESS. I can't do that. I had to grow up. I'm going to get married. I have all this other shit I have to do now. And Takuvma's like, but you still continued, all this work on the ship.
Like renovations stuff?
Yeah, but it was mainly because like the peasants that they said like, hey, you can come, serve us, and we're gonna go on like this quest to find KAHLESS and everything. Like those people were so like downtrodden and had like nothing else in life.
Yeah.
So like they just kept like fixing the ship and everything. 'Cause it's like this is their only way out of their shitty life on Kronos and poverty. And this is where it's revealed the ship has a cloaking device, and so Jaula explains that the ship a century ago, our family invented this cloaking technology.
Okay.
Which I have a big problem with this, because cloaking technology at that point, should really only be a thing that the Romulans shouldn't even have it, even though we saw them have it in Enterprise.
Right, but that was a cheat.
Yeah, I kind of don't like any cloaking device to exist before Balance of Terror.
Yeah.
But, whatever.
Cloaking devices became a big thing in Discovery. Them trying to find their way around Klingon cloaks. In the show, in Discovery, was it based on Romulan tech?
In my headcanon it is. But
they didn't make a point to mention it? Okay.
All we know is that, T'Kuvma had the cloaking technology. And then Cole shared it with other people after T'Kuvma died.
Okay.
But we also see T'Kuvma reunite with his friend Kel. And,
the other albino kid?
And Kel is kind of warning T'Kuvma, your sister's really changed. I don't know if we can trust her anymore. And, I'm glad to have you back, but I think your sister, she's not to be trusted.
She's sold out, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
For the easy life.
But T'Kuvma says, you know what, Kel, I'm here to visit my sister, to honor her on her wedding day. She's still family to me. And then he goes and he visits the catacombs again and sees his father's sarcophagus. And kind of paying his respects to his father. Very Game of Thrones. It's like whenever a Stark returns to Winterfell, they gotta go down into the catacombs. Yeah.
Yep.
But then he steps out into the wedding hall, and T'Kuvma sees his entire family massacred, with Ja'ula standing next to this Klingon who declares, I am Delore of House Mokai, and basically all your family is dead now and you have to kneel to me.
This is the guy who his sister is betrothed to.
Yeah.
Has killed off his family for, I don't know what reason.
Well, yeah, it's a cliffhanger.
It's a cliffhanger.
So then we go into the next chapter.
Alright. Again, these are all pretty interesting machinations and things. It does speak a little, maybe... we knew Game of Thrones was, they talked about it being an influence on the show. This might be a slightly too great an influence.
Yeah, this is definitely, Klingon Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But it'd be cooler if they didn't have all the Discovery Season 1 aesthetics.
Yep.
But what we learn is that Delore had all T'Kuvma's family killed so he could marry Ja'ula and then have all of their wealth, because she would inherit it. And he's demanding that T'Kuvma, pledge their loyalty to House Mokai now.
I feel like this is a good move on Delore's part. In Klingon terms, I'm with him. In human terms, he's a monster.
Well, T'Kuvma still he's kind of badass here because he's like the calm monk. He's kind of like a guy I don't know. He doesn't
shriek out he's not like my family.
Yeah, he just says I will not kneel. And he'll never kneel to another house.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty dope.
But Ja'ula says that, she'll deal with this herself, deal with her brother. And she's just like, look, bro, this is my only way out of this shitty life. And I basically can't have any male relatives because then you'll be the heir to all of our house and our wealth. And so I gotta have a knife fight with you and kill you. And so then they have a brother-sister knife fight with the Duktags that we know T'Kuvma is well skilled at.
Right.
And as they're fighting, they kind of reach a standstill. And T'Kuvma still has this calmness and this confidence about him. But he says, as he kind of negotiates his way out of it. But the way he does it is very Klingon and very honorable. It definitely doesn't seem cowardly at all. But they fight to a standstill, and he says, I am not afraid to bleed, I am not afraid to die, but if you kill me, your soul dies with me. The soul of the sister I knew. And he basically tells her, you can have the house. I don't care about the family. I don't care about House Jura. You can have all of that. I'm not going to fight you for it. But I'm going to ask for two things. I'm going to ask for that ship, and I'm going to ask for all the sarcophagi. All of the bones of our ancestors.
Mm-hmm. Can we add the caption under that of slow, heavy metal music playing?
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And then that kind of like works on. Yeah, I need like Koth or Electric Wizard or some sludgy doom metal right here. But
Yeah.
the Klingon servants like chain up all of the sarcophagi and they like drag them out of the house, out of the catacombs, like through the field under the light of a full moon and aboard the ship of the dead.
Yeah.
That's metal as fuck.
It really is. I gotta give it to him there.
So Takuvma has like all of his family ancestors, and he's talking to Kel, and he says, this isn't just going to be about me and my family. All who are part of our ship, we'll keep all of our families, our dead ancestors, our dead relatives, on sarcophagi on the ship. And Kel
he is super into Klingon brotherhood.
Yeah, and Kel's like, we're not all rich like you and your family. We can't afford these expensive ass coffins. And he's like, well, my sister's not going to care about our house. She just wants the land. So we'll just take the stones of my family's ancestral home and we'll use those to make all the future sarcophagi we need for our Klingon clan that's going to roll around in the ship of the dead.
So they like dismantle their Klingon castle to build Klingon caskets?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, I'm down with it.
And then they finally
decide...
decide...
I appreciate his lack of class distinction there. That he's trying to put everybody on his corpse ship on equal footing.
And then they finally decide it's time to set course to go find KAHLESS and find the beacon that will summon KAHLESS. And Takuvma has seen the vision of this light that he knows that's his path is to go and search for KAHLESS. And then they bring out the armor that we see Takuvma in when he appears on the show.
Yep, his high-collared armor.
And so, I'm not really crazy about that design either. But it's kind of cool how ceremonious they make this, where like he stops wearing like the robe that we also don't like, and put on his iconic armor, I guess. If you could say he's iconic, but it's the look that he is known for.
Yeah. And
they leave Kronos, and Ja'ula watches the ship leave without her, and you get the impression that she feels a bit of regret. And we cut to 1 year later, she's on Kronos giving birth, and we see like this really weird Klingon birthing mechanism.
Oh, yeah.
And like buckets of birthing fluid beneath her. That's kind of gross.
You know how when Rocky trained in Rocky 4 and like Ivan Drago was doing all his high tech stuff, but Rocky was like lifting logs and pushing boulders? Their birthing ceremony looks like Rocky was the advisor for it. Rocky 4
between two logs. I think I actually had that same thought though when I was reading this.
She's got like her hands on branches while she's like and launching the baby from her.
But she does birth a son, and her son is albino.
Okay.
But I'm not sure why. Like, I'm thinking, like, is this Kel's kid? And it's never addressed.
Like, as if... do you think there could be a suggestion that Vok is Takuvma's sister's kid?
Well, maybe. Because I was about to bring that up.
Or there's, like you said, they thought albino Klingons was going to be a bigger thing.
Yeah, either way. Because, like, the next page, she's telling her husband, Delore, that the baby was stillborn.
But that's not true.
It's not true. And we later learn that she killed the baby because he was albino.
Did she really?
But yeah. Well, we don't see it, but that's what is discussed. So maybe that baby is Vok, or maybe it's just another Klingon albino.
Interesting.
It's weird, but
it seems like if it would be a good story structure to have that happen in the third issue, to believe he was dead, and then to suddenly reveal in the fourth and final issue that he would grow up to be Vok, that her brother would surmise this and see it as a way of keeping his sister's Klingon, dedication to unity alive. But it sounds like, in any case, even if that might be the interpretation we were supposed to pick up, it sounds like they don't spell it out.
They don't. But what does happen here is that he's really mad that she didn't birth him a male heir. And she says, we can try again. We've only been married a year. And he says, well, you know what? I'm just taking all of your assets, all of House Gurjal, and I'm just merging it all into House Mokai. Mm-hmm. And it's just all going to be mine. You're not going to be in control of anything. Mm-hmm. She's pissed because she's like, no, that's not what we agreed to. You said that I would keep control of House Gurjal. And she says that that's dishonorable, but he says, if you want to talk about honor, the honorable thing for me to do is whatever is best for House Mokai. And if you can't understand that, you should have left with your little brother. So then we cut back to, this is kind of like in, what's the movie? Princess Buttercup.
Princess Bride.
It's kind of like in Princess Bride when they keep cutting back to the grandfather and the kid.
Oh, yeah,
but we cut to Laurel and Voke, and it's kind of funny.
Oh, this was the framing story where they were telling it.
And so, because it'll periodically cut back to them, and she's telling, the story to Voke. But it's funny, because you have this panel where Voke is saying, the Kuvma's sister killed her child because he had skin like mine, and he's, really, offended by that. Which, I guess we shouldn't laugh at that. Poor Voke. Poor Klingon albinos, second-class citizens. But T'Kuvma goes on his quest across the stars, searching for the beacon to summon KAHLESS. And he still has his friend Kel by his side.
His old albino buddy.
Yeah. And as they're flying around, they do come across an unknown object. But it's not the beacon. It's a Starfleet or a Federation communication relay, like the one that we see in the first episode of Star Trek Discovery, that was damaged. The Shinjo is dispatched to repair, and eventually that leads into the Battle of the Binary Stars.
Yep.
But this is kind of a big deal for the Klingons because they have never seen Federation technology this close to their territory, and so T'Kuvma is really pissed off by that. So he feels like they've reached out too far, and they actually they bring the relay on board, and they're inspecting it, and they're kind of very paranoid about this. They're like, oh yeah, this thing can monitor the movements of our fleets and listen to our communications.
Are they wrong?
I think they're right, but they don't destroy it. They decide to leave it be and go back to Kronos and organize all the Klingon houses, and then give the Federation a fight that will get them the fuck out of Klingon territory, or close to Klingon territory. Laurel explains how around this time period, though, T'Kuvma's crew was basically just going around the Empire, kind of like vigilante style. They're freeing enslaved Klingons that other Klingons are using as slaves, and killing the slavers, and just wherever they see dishonor, they have this really exploitive sequence where there's naked women fighting with spears in a pit, and people
I was about to say that does sound like Spartacus's slave revolt.
Yeah.
If we are looking for other influences.
Yeah.
On this.
You see people betting money over these fights and stuff, but then T'Kuvma and his posse roll up and start decapitating the assholes and freeing the slaves.
Yep.
As you can imagine, this doesn't go over very well with the aristocratic class and the leadership at the capital. And so they're having a Klingon high council gathering, and they're basically saying, this T'Kuvma guy is out of control, but he's insanely popular. What are we going to do about this? And Ja'ula is there, and they're like, for all we know, you're working with them. And we actually see Cole, who we know from Star Trek Discovery is the biggest asshole of the entire Klingon Empire.
Right.
He's saying, we can't trust her, and then he starts giving shit to Delore, and he says, you're just a puppet, Delore. We all know House Mokai is controlled by the matriarchs. They always mention these Mokai matriarchs that we never see, but they just mention them. But I'm really curious about seeing them, hopefully in Season 2 of Discovery.
Makes sense. I'm sure that they will return to that at some point.
But Cole is basically just grandstanding, talking about how, I could deal with T'Kuvma, I could hunt him down and put an end to him. And then right as he's saying this, the door is open, and T'Kuvma walks in.
It's a very Star Trek nemesis. But with Romulans, or Klingons instead of Romulans.
And T'Kuvma approaches Ja'ula.
Huh?
And she says, brother, what are you doing here? Half of the Klingons in this building want to kill you. At this point, he basically tells her, you're not my sister anymore. You stopped being related to me when you destroyed our house. So don't try to show concern for me. And T'Kuvma says, there is a bigger threat to the Empire. and we need to all band together because there's this despicable band of weird aliens. Their little federation, and they're coming way too close to our territory, and it's not going to be good for the Klingons when they try to, assimilate us into their federation.
I don't know if the show or this quite gave me one spy satellite, even though it's supposed to be like the ultimate spy satellite, still doesn't quite feel like enough motivation for the kind of level of war effort he gets up and running.
He's just really paranoid. He's just really xenophobic.
I get that part. That part I believe. But anyway, pray continue. Does he kill everybody?
Well, then there's a bunch of, noise coming from outside the council chambers, and it turns out that, all the masses of Kronos, they're all cheering for T'Kuvma, and he has this cult of personality has evolved to this point to where everyone believes he is KAHLESS returned.
So the council can't exactly go and off him right at this point.
Yeah.
Even though he's right in front of them. It'd be a very visual thing because, their big old pyramid-looking thing is surrounded by what looks like thousands of people chanting T'Kuvma.
Yeah, and he tells them, "I've delivered I've delivered my message to you. Put me in chains if you must, or follow the will of the people." And Cole is, again, talking shit to T'Kuvma. And it's kind of funny what he says here, because he's not convinced that T'Kuvma is ever going to, find this beacon that'll light the path of KAHLESS. But Cole tells him, very well, "I promise to fight by your side on the day that you find this mythical beacon that generations of fools have wasted their lives looking for." Which is funny because when the beacon is found, Cole, he's the only Klingon that doesn't show up to fight the Federation.
Right.
But yeah, he's just supposed to be the most despicable bad guy on the show. But the High Council of Klingons kind of dismisses him, but the people love T'Kuvma, and so this is where he gets a bunch of followers. And we see Voke as a little boy, and he has a mother, but maybe there's an adopted mother who took him in. If this is secretly T'Kuvma's nephew, if that's what they're doing. But essentially, Voke and L'Rell are both younger here, but this is when they get on T'Kuvma's ship, and they join the crew of the Ship of the Dead, and they continue on his search for this beacon, because in T'Kuvma's mind, all he's got to do is find this beacon. All the Klingon houses will be excited that they found the beacon to KAHLESS, and they'll all join them in a fight against the Federation. And back on board his ship, though, he finds Kel has this giant stone structure, and he's like, "What is this?" And Kel says, "I made it." And he says, "I made the beacon." And basically he presents this idea to T'Kuvma. He's like, "Look, we never know if we're going to find this thing, but if we just present this as the beacon, no one will know that this is something that I made, and we can unite all the houses, and we can go to war with the Federation."
Well, it's interesting. They say, building the Shroud of Turin or something like that, or the Holy Grail.
Yeah. And so Voke hears this from L'Rell, and he's surprised, he's shocked, he's kind of offended, and L'Rell says, T'Kuvma was so great, he didn't want to burden everyone with the secret. And Voke kind of turns around, he's like, "No, he should have trusted us, we would have got behind him." But essentially, T'Kuvma has his beacon now, and the story ends with, "Commander, we have a Federation ship on our scans," and he says, "Light the beacon." And I guess this is supposed to be in the first episode of Discovery, the Vulcan Hello, when the beacon lights up and reveals itself to the Shinjo.
Interesting. So his journey takes him to the point where he becomes so dedicated that he's willing to get behind a ruse to unite them with a false prophecy, essentially, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I have some issues with the story, because I think it did a good job building T'Kuvma up as the ultimate true believer that was dedicated and had the conviction, and then I think it kind of cheapens it to have him
a guy who at the last minute was willing to fake it.
Yeah, and it kind of feels well, how do we wrap this up now?
Yeah.
He's like, oh, well, it'd be kind of dumb if we just write, like, oh, he finds the beacon all of a sudden. So what's this how I'm like, oh, they build their own beacon and lie about it.
That would be interesting, like, if it had felt like it was always building to that, like, if his faith had started to lapse after, like, years of not finding it, and there was he realized that the people, the power base he was building was going to fall apart if he didn't hurry up and find it. Were they suggesting that?
Not really.
Because I felt like if like that was almost the theme, and then he was driven to that.
Well, no, I take that back. Yeah, there is a scene in there where he says he does worry that if he searches for too long, these people will start to lose faith in him.
Okay.
So he confesses to Kel that, like, you know, I'm scared that if I don't do something soon, that this whole thing might fall apart. So yeah, it does have that.
I guess I can see that. It would be interesting if he thought to himself, like, you know, I'm going to have to kind of betray my principles here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, you know, all the anger that instills in me, I'm going to bring that all to the Federation. I'm going to unleash a holy hell on them for forcing me to compromise myself, even the slightest like this. It would be kind of, I kind of wish there was something like that felt a little bit more like a clear-cut arc rather than the kind of hasty arc it feels like it might have been.
Yeah, that would have been a better take.
Yeah.
But there are some cool ideas in there.
Yeah. There's some pretty metal stuff in there. I think in a lot of ways it's sort of hamstrung by the fact that the show itself didn't have, I think, I don't know if anybody has, like, gotten firmly behind its Klingons. There were interesting scenes with them, and there were individual characters I liked, and I liked Laurel as a character. But I still always felt like I was just not as on board them as I would have been with a more traditional version of Klingons, even if that was used in service to revealing some more nuances of their society and that not everybody was exactly like them. So like the comic, I think, unfortunately started from a difficult spot.
Right, and my favorite moments of Star Trek Discovery are the non-Klingon episodes.
Right.
And I love the mirror universe stuff. I love Magic's to make the sanest man go mad with Harry Mudd.
Yep.
I love Lethe, where they go on, like, the rescue mission to get Sarek.
Yep.
Those are all the things that, like, didn't have the Klingons.
Do you think how much of the Klingon sort of re-envisionment do you think was Brian Fuller?
Oh, all of it.
Do you think they just needed that was the thing more than anything else that they maybe needed to step away from?
Yeah, I mean...
And that they're going to be, like, probably for, like, the next year or two, kind of doing a bit of damage control on that?
Well, I think Brian Fuller had a clear idea of what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it might have been better if he stuck around and was able to do it.
Right, like, he would have... His vision might not have felt like Klingons, but it might have been a better vision of the alternate Klingons than what we got.
Yeah. But, yeah, so just having, like, the way that they look, and the way that, like, their clothes look, their houses look, their ships look, their weapons, like, everything, it does feel less Klingon.
Yeah.
And so reading this at times almost feels like it's like another species altogether.
Right.
But there are, like, cool little moments that I do think would be cool to factor into the, like, more traditional Klingon lore. And I do kind of love, like, the Game of Thrones vibes. And we get hints of that in past Star Trek.
Yeah.
And so that's what I like most about this, is, like, those interesting kind of, like, backstabby politics and stuff like that. I guess that would almost feel more at home with, like, Romulans in Star Trek. But
well, Worf had to battle through all sorts of Klingon politics.
Yeah.
That was his biggest, you know, character arc on Next Generation, and weirdly I felt like almost like this felt more like medieval Europe type politics and not as Klingon-y as his stuff. Which there was, you know, they had their weird, you know, the way their house ran, which is probably closest to, like, feudal Japan and their sort of notions of honor and, like, how that might be very counterintuitive to a very sort of democratic type outfit like the Federation. But yeah, I felt like the Klingons of Worf's time might have felt more Klingon-y than these guys.
Yeah, but, well, apparently they're less Klingon-y because they're after after they've started to become the domesticated Klingons that are allies with the Federation. And these are Discovery would have us believe that these are the true Klingons, the pure Klingons.
Well, we will see. Ultimately, that's not sort of for us to decide, but fandom as a whole and the producers of subsequent projects will decide how much of this sticks around, how much of it they kind of bend, and who can tell on that? Star Trek is always slightly course correcting, no matter what. But I'll say this: it's an interesting story they spun.
A more interesting story
yes.
would be, instead of what happened leading into Star Trek Discovery Season 1, would be what happens leading out of it. Specifically in the mirror universe. Because Discovery sees the, spoiler alert, we see the destruction of the Terran Empire's flagship. Mm-hmm. And we see their Emperor leave their universe, and so kind of everything with the Terran Empire is in disarray at the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 1.
Right.
So in our next podcast, we'll be talking about the comic Star Trek Discovery Succession that actually explains what happens in the aftermath of Season 1.
I hope it's peace and tranquility.
Well, you're going to be disappointed.
Shit.
But be sure to check out that podcast, and also, we will be doing the live streams covering short treks. Next one coming up on December 6th. That's going to be The Brightest Star, where we see Saru's backstory. Ooh. And so that live stream will be going up at an hour after the short trek is posted in North America. So 9:30 Eastern.
Right on.
Or no, it'll be 10:30 Eastern, 9:30 Central where I am. But that's all we got for now. And so until next time, live long and prosper, y'all. Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter at TXTrek, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.